If only I had known what that knock on the door meant, I would never have opened it. But how could I have known? It was just another quiet evening in Umuola. The lantern flickered softly, and the distant sound of a flute floated through the air. Then the knock came, soft at first, almost like a whisper. But as I approached the door, it grew louder. And when I opened it, I knew my life would never be the same again. I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped inside the house. But I was tired, too tired to pay attention to the little things. My name is Emma, and I live in a small village called Umuola. It was supposed to be a peaceful evening, until the strange things started happening. I had just returned from the market, my basket heavy with fresh yam, palm oil, and okra. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the village. I hadn't expected anything out of the ordinary. I lived in a house built by my late husband, Chijiok, a house we had planned to grow old in. But that evening, that simple, quiet evening, everything changed. And I regret that I didn't see it coming. I regret that I ignored the first signs, thinking they were nothing more than the fatigue of a long day. It started in the kitchen. The door, which I always close tightly behind me when I'm done cooking, was ajar. I knew I had closed it earlier. I'm certain of it. It was always something I checked before leaving the room. But there it was, slightly open, the dim light from the hallway spilling in. I felt a shiver run through me. I paused in the doorway, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. Maybe I had simply forgotten. But no, I knew that wasn't true. Something was off. I shook my head and muttered to myself, "Get a grip, Emma." As I entered the kitchen, I noticed the silence. It was too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet I had come to expect at night, but a heavy, suffocating silence, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I turned on the light, and for a second it flickered. Just once. A quick flash, like a dying flame, before it steadied. I froze, staring at the bulb. The light had never flickered before. The house was old, yes, but nothing had ever malfunctioned like this. A small, uncomfortable knot tightened in my chest, but I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me after a long day. I made myself some tea to calm my nerves. But as I sat at the table, the uneasy feeling didn't go away. I couldn't shake it. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was standing just behind me, waiting for me to turn around. But every time I glanced behind me, nothing was there. My thoughts started to race. Chijiok was gone, and I was alone. It was a lonely feeling, but I had gotten used to it. Still, tonight felt different, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I decided I needed fresh air, so I stepped outside onto the porch. The cool evening breeze was supposed to soothe me, but as I walked across the worn wooden boards, I noticed something odd. A letter, just lying there on the porch, as if it had been waiting for me. I stopped in my tracks. It was out of place. I didn't receive letters often, and when I did, they were from family or the village elders. But this one was different. There was no return address, no name, no stamp. It was just a plain, off-white envelope, slightly crinkled as though it had been hurriedly shoved into my path. It looked wrong. My heartbeat quickened. I bent down slowly and picked it up, my fingers trembling. As I held the letter in my hands, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it. Not the physical weight. No, the weight of something far more sinister. I could feel my pulse in my throat, the blood rushing to my head. I looked around quickly, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the night was eerily still. There were no sounds of crickets, no rustling leaves in the trees, only the occasional creak of wood beneath my feet. I glanced back at the letter, then turned it over. No markings on the back, nothing at all, just a blank, lifeless surface staring back at me. I slowly pulled the flap open and slid the contents out. The paper inside was rough, uneven, the ink bold and hurried. I could barely make out the slanted letters. It was the handwriting of someone who had written quickly. Too quickly. I read the words, my eyes growing wider with each line. There was only one sentence, written in large, uneven letters. "They're watching you." I stood there, the letter in my hands, my mind racing. My heart felt as though it was pounding out of my chest. "They're watching you." The words repeated in my head. I turned the letter over again, hoping to find something, anything that might explain it. But there was nothing. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on me. My skin tingled with the sensation that something wasn't right. And then I saw it. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing just beyond the fence of the yard. It was too far to see clearly, but I could make out the outline of a person, tall and still. They weren't moving. They were just watching me. I dropped the letter and backed away slowly, my heart in my throat. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My feet felt as if they were glued to the ground. And then, as if in response to my fear, the figure moved, slowly, but not toward me. It turned and disappeared into the dark, leaving me standing there, shivering in the cold night air. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't stay there any longer. I ran back in the house, locked the door, and collapsed onto the floor, my hands still trembling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but in my gut, I knew something worse was coming. Something far worse. I thought I could forget. I thought I could leave the past behind and start over here in Umuola, in this house Chijiok and I built with so much love. But the past doesn't stay buried. It finds you no matter where you hide. And now, it was clawing its way back, one shadow, one whisper, one sleepless night at a time. Emma had locked the door and bolted every window, but sleep did not come easily. The letter's words echoed in her mind. "They're watching you." She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing with every creak and groan the old housemaid. At some point, exhaustion overtook her and she drifted into a restless sleep. But the dreams came. In her dream, she was standing in the middle of a dark forest, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. A faint light flickered in the distance, drawing her forward. She didn't want to go, but her feet moved on their own, crunching twigs underfoot. As she drew closer to the light, she realized it was coming from an old oil lamp, held by a shadowy figure standing with their back to her. "Chijiok," she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. The lamp's flame flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the forest floor. Then, slowly, the figure turned. But it wasn't Chijiok. It was a face she didn't recognize, hollow eyes and a wide, unsettling grin. The figure raised a hand, pointing behind her. Emma turned and saw her old house, but it wasn't as she had left it. The windows were broken, the walls covered in thick, black vines that seemed to pulse like veins. A voice echoed through the trees, low and menacing. "You can't hide from the truth." She woke with a start, her chest heaving, sweat dripping down her face. It took her a moment to realize she was no longer in the forest, but in her room. The faint light of dawn seeped through the curtains, but something felt wrong. She sat up and froze. Her bedside table was empty. The lamp, her book, the glass of water she had placed there the night before, gone. Her eyes darted around the room, and that's when she saw it. The items were on the floor, neatly arranged in a perfect circle. At first, I told myself it was nothing. I thought I must have knocked them over in my sleep. But the circle, it was too precise, too deliberate. My hands shook as I picked up the items, placing them back on the table. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. As the days passed, the occurrences grew more unsettling. Candles flickered even when there was no breeze. Mirrors seemed to ripple as though they were pools of water. And then the shadows came. It started subtly. Emma would catch a glimpse of movement from the corner of her eye, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Then one night, she saw a shadow slide across the wall. Even though no one else was in the room, she stared, unable to move, as the shadow seemed to stretch and grow, creeping toward her before vanishing into the corner. She began to dread the nights, knowing sleep would bring no rest. The nightmares became more vivid, each one dragging her deeper into a past she had tried so hard to forget. She saw herself as a young woman, standing in the rain, clutching a child's toy. The sound of wailing echoed around her, but she couldn't see where it was coming from. I kept seeing that child's toy in my dreams, a small carved wooden doll with a missing arm. I didn't know why it haunted me, but then I found it. One morning, while searching for her misplaced shawl, Emma opened an old chest she had avoided since Chijioke's death. Inside, she found photographs of her younger self and Chijioke, smiling brightly on their wedding day. Beneath them, she discovered a journal. The pages were worn and faded, the ink smudged in places. As she flipped through, she came across a passage that made her blood run cold. The dreams won't stop. I see her every night, standing at the edge of the forest. She calls my name, but I can't answer. I can't face what I've done. The handwriting was Chijioke's. I didn't understand. What was he talking about? Who was calling him? And what had he done that he couldn't face? My hands trembled as I turned the pages, desperate for answers. But before I could read more, I heard it, a loud crash from the kitchen. Emma raced downstairs, her heart pounding. She found the kitchen in disarray. Plates were shattered on the floor, and the cupboard doors swung open and shut as though an invisible force was playing with them. And on the wall, scratched deep into the plaster, were the words, "You can't run from the truth." She stumbled back, her mind reeling. The air felt thick, suffocating. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, slow and deliberate. She turned, but no one was there. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me, the words on the wall burning into my mind. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything went still. The silence was deafening, and then a deafening crash came from upstairs, followed by the sound of glass shattering. The lights flickered violently before plunging the house into darkness. I should have left the house that night. I should have run and never looked back. But I stayed, and that was my greatest mistake. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I thought I could piece together what was happening and somehow make it right. But the truth was far more horrifying than I could have imagined. And when I finally uncovered it, there was no going back, no redemption, no escape. The night was suffocatingly dark. The village of Umuola, once a place of peace, now felt like a trap. Emma sat in her dimly lit living room, the journal open in her lap. The words Chijioke had written felt like a warning, a confession, and a plea for forgiveness all at once. She calls my name, but I can't answer. I can't face what I've done. Emma's breath hitched as she traced the words with her finger. Her mind raced with questions. Who was she? What had Chijioke done? And how was it connected to the terrifying events unfolding now? As she pondered, the silence of the house was broken by a low, guttural whisper. Emma? She froze. The voice was soft, almost tender, but it carried an edge of malice that made her skin crawl. You can't hide forever. The room grew colder, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, blood, perhaps. Emma stood, clutching the journal tightly. She turned toward the hallway, where the shadows seemed to thicken, swirling and twisting into unnatural shapes. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The shadows coalesced, forming the silhouette of a woman. Her face was obscured, but her presence radiated anger and sorrow. "You know who I am," the figure said, her voice echoing like a chorus of whispers. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream that I didn't know. But deep down I did. The truth had been buried in the back of my mind, hidden behind years of guilt and denial. And now it was clawing its way out. The figure stepped closer, and the flickering candlelight illuminated her face. Emma gasped, stumbling back. It was the woman from her nightmares. The same hollow eyes, the same unsettling grin. "You took everything from me," the woman hissed. Emma shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't understand. I didn't—" The woman raised a hand, and suddenly, Emma was no longer in her house. She was back in the forest from her dreams. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their branches clawing at the sky. The air was thick with fog, and the faint sound of a child crying echoed in the distance. "Do you remember now?" The woman's voice whispered in her ear, though she was nowhere to be seen. Emma stumbled forward, her bare feet sinking into the muddy ground. The cries grew louder, more desperate. She followed the sound, her heart pounding. And then she saw it, a small clearing bathed in an eerie, pale light. In the center was the wooden doll from her dreams, lying on the ground next to a child's shoe. Memories flooded back, hitting her like a tidal wave. Years ago, before she met Chijioke, she had been a young teacher in another village. One rainy evening, she had been driving home when she struck something on the road. Panicked, she had gotten out to find a little girl lying motionless. The rain had washed away the blood, but the image of the child's lifeless body had burned itself into her mind. Terrified, Emma had fled, leaving the scene and burying the memory deep within her. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The woman, the entity, was the child's mother, seeking vengeance for what Emma had done. I thought I could leave the past behind, but it had followed me here. I had tried to forget, but she wouldn't let me. And now, I had to face what I had done. The forest began to dissolve, and Emma found herself back in her house. The woman stood before her, her hollow eyes burning with rage. "You stole her from me, and now I will take everything from you." Emma's heart raced as the woman lunged at her. She ducked, narrowly avoiding the attack, and ran toward the kitchen. She grabbed the oil lamp and hurled it at the figure, but it passed through her, shattering against the wall. "You can't fight me," the woman taunted. "This house is mine now, and so are you." I didn't know what to do. The house was alive with her presence, the walls closing in, the whispers growing louder. But then I remembered something Chijioke had written in his journal, a way to break the curse. It wouldn't be easy, but it was my only chance. Emma grabbed the journal and ran to the fireplace. She tore out the pages detailing Chijioke's rituals and began following the steps. She lit candles, drew symbols on the floor with chalk, and chanted the words written in Igbo. The house trembled, the walls cracking as the woman screamed. Shadows swirled around Emma, clawing at her, but she held her ground. "Leave me alone," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The woman's face twisted with rage and sorrow. For a moment, she hesitated, as though Emma's words had reached her. But the rage returned, and she lunged again. In a final act of desperation, Emma threw the wooden doll she had found into the fire. The flames roared to life, consuming the doll. The woman screamed, her form dissolving into smoke. The house shook violently, and then silence. I collapsed to the floor, my body trembling. The house was still, the air no longer heavy. She was gone, but the guilt remained. I had faced the truth, but it didn't set me free. It only reminded me of what I had lost. I thought I had won, but some things can never truly be destroyed. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The house was quiet now, but the silence felt heavy, like the calm after a storm that isn't quite over. I wanted to believe it was finished, that I had done enough. But deep down, I wasn't sure. And sometimes, not knowing is worse than the fear itself. The first light of dawn spilled through the cracked windows, casting long shadows across the room. Emma sat on the floor, her back against the soot-streaked fireplace. Her hands were still trembling, her breath shallow as if the house had been holding her hostage, and she was only now beginning to escape. She glanced at the charred remnants of the wooden doll, the edges of its carved face still faintly visible amidst the ash. Was it over? The woman screamed. The way her form had dissolved into smoke. Emma wanted to believe it was final, that she had severed whatever connection tied her to this nightmare. But the air still felt thick, like the house was holding its breath. I should have left immediately, but I needed to be sure. I needed to see for myself that it was truly gone, that she was truly gone. Emma stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. The house felt unfamiliar now, as though it had aged decades in the span of a single night. The walls bore deep cracks, the paint peeling away to reveal the rotting wood underneath. She moved cautiously, checking every room. The shadows no longer moved. The whispers had stopped. In the kitchen, the etchings on the wall had disappeared, replaced by blank plaster. The windows were streaked with condensation, but beyond them, the world looked peaceful. Just another quiet morning in Umuola. And yet, something gnawed at her. The house was empty, but it didn't feel free. It was as if it was waiting, watching. I told myself it was my imagination, but the feeling stayed with me, like a weight I couldn't shake. As Emma packed her belongings, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder every few minutes. It was a habit now, an instinct, even though she knew there was nothing there. The journal lay on the table, its pages charred at the edges. She hesitated before placing it in the box. I should burn it all, she muttered to herself. But something stopped her. Instead, she buried the journal beneath a pile of clothes, as though hiding it would keep the memories at bay. I knew I should have destroyed the journal, but some part of me couldn't let go. Maybe I wanted to remember, or maybe I was afraid to forget. By the time Emma finished loading the car, the sun was fully up, its golden rays stretching across the dirt road that led away from the house. She stood in the driveway for a moment, staring at the crumbling structure. The house seemed smaller now, its once bright exterior faded and cracked. She thought she saw something move in one of the upper windows, but when she blinked, it was gone. Her daughter, Ada, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, are we going now?" Emma forced a smile, brushing a hand through Ada's curls. "Yes, my love, we're leaving. We won't come back." Ada tilted her head, holding up a piece of paper. "Look what I drew." Emma's heart skipped a beat as she took the paper. The drawing was crude, done in the bright colors of Ada's crayons. But the figure in the center was unmistakable. A woman with hollow eyes and an unsettling grin stood in the doorway of the house, her hand reaching toward a small child. "Where did you see this, Ada?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ada shrugged. "She was in my room last night. She said she's our friend." I felt my stomach drop. The air around me seemed to freeze, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask Ada what she meant. But instead I smiled, folded the drawing, and told her to get in the car. As they drove away, Emma couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. The house grew smaller with every turn, its shadow stretching across the dirt road like a dark scar. Just as they rounded the final bend, she thought she saw a figure standing in the window, watching them leave. We left the house that day, but something followed us. I don't know if we'll ever truly escape. Maybe you can't run from the truth. Maybe it finds you no matter where you go. The morning sun streams through the broken windows, but the golden light cannot chase away the house's deep, unsettling shadows. The walls appear older now, the cracks deeper, as if the structure itself is decaying under the weight of its secrets. You might think the story ends here, with Emma and her daughter escaping that cursed house. But sometimes, an ending is just the beginning of something far worse. The silence in the house feels loud, heavy, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath. Slowly, the sound of tires crunching gravel breaks the stillness. A moving truck pulls into the driveway, followed by a small car. A cheerful family, a father, mother, and their teenage son, step out, their faces full of hope and excitement. The son glances up at the house, his smile faltering as he notices something in the upstairs window. The camera zooms in to reveal a faint silhouette, but when he blinks, it's gone. It didn't take long for the house to find new inhabitants. It always does. They say it waits, choosing its victims carefully, and when they arrive, it welcomes them with open arms. The family begins to unload boxes, their laughter and chatter starkly contrasting the house's eerie stillness. The camera pans to the mother, who notices an old journal on the porch. She picks it up, brushing off the soot-covered leather. "Mother, what's this? Did someone leave this here?" Father, calling from the truck. "What? Probably just junk from the last owners. Toss it." The mother hesitates, flipping through the pages. Her face darkens as she reads. The words seem disjointed at first, ramblings, half-sentences, and cryptic drawings. But as she turns to the last page, her eyes widen. The journal had waited too, filled with the warnings no one would heed. And on its final page, scrawled in hurried letters, were the words, "It lives in the walls. It watches, and it never forgets." Close-up of the journal's page with a haunting message. The camera pans to the boy inside, exploring the dusty living room. He touches the wall, and faint whispers echo through the room. His face pales, but when he looks back, the sound stops. The family didn't know it yet, but they were already part of the house's story. A story that had been waiting to continue. The camera cuts to the family settling in that evening. The boy unpacks in his room, placing a photo of his friends on the desk. As he turns to adjust a lamp, the photo falls. When he picks it up, there's a faint scratch across it that wasn't there before. "Boy," muttering, "must have dropped it." Later that night, the father is woken by the sound of faint laughter. He checks on his wife and son, finding them asleep, dismissing it as his imagination. He returns to bed, but as the camera lingers on the hallway, the laughter grows louder. You might think this is where the story ends, but what if I told you this was just the beginning? Stay tuned for the story of the family who moved in next. And remember, some houses don't just hold memories, they create them. What do you think happened to Emma? Could she have prevented it? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more chilling tales. See you in the next video.